Quotations from myself, segment 88, quotation number 1039. The sweeping generalized pronouncement, especially of the wholesale condemnations of universal sin kind, are often used for a lack of specificity as an equally universal weapon of convenience, but the opposite in warring sides in any conflict, as with seemingly equal justification or lack thereof. The Bible is the most perfect example of such a misuse. For condemning the ungodliness, wickedness, foolishness, etc., without specifically indicating, as many biblical prophets and saints were prone to do, who is actually ungodly, wicked, foolish, etc., its author has provided, perhaps unwittingly, the successive generation of Christians with the excuse to split in the numerous factions and with ready-made all-purpose ammunition to hurl at each other. Thus, when the universal truth is turned into universal condemnation, instead of unifying force, it becomes the means of division and internal strife. 1040. One can never please those who decided well in advance, before anything done to them, whether to be pleased or displeased. But after they have made up their minds, and don't try to figure out what governed their choice, or even they have a rather vague idea of it, to assume certain pattern of behavior for an hour or for a day, it seldom lasts longer, and puts himself in this or that particular mood, that is, to be petulant or magnanimous, angry or forgiving, ungrateful, appreciative, etc., rarely anything external can change it. For if such a capricious person decides to be happy, the stones thrown at him or her will be called flowers, and vice versa. When in an angry mood, will react to the flowers he or she is showered with as if they were stones. 1041. When some 2,300 years ago Aristotle introduced in his Politics still useful classification of different types of states, such as monarchy, aristocracy, tyranny, oligarchy, democracy, including their various subdivisions, he had failed to point out, to the best of my knowledge, one very important feature common to all of them, namely, the type of individuals who invariably rise to the top, no matter what system of government is in place. For as far as their personal characteristics and psychological profiles are concerned, the people in position of power in any kind of state are always the same. That is, vain, over-ambitious, power-hungry, callous, cruel, ruthless, unscrupulous, greedy, etc. And whether they are born to power, seized it, or elected to govern is largely irrelevant to who they essentially are, and for that matter to the governed. So it shouldn't surprise anyone, especially one who has lived through the 20th century, that the more things change politically, economically, ideologically speaking, the more they, as far as who rules is concerned, stay the same. And if one is looking for a concrete example of this universal phenomenon, the miraculous transformation of the former Soviet apparatchiks and uncompromising communist ideologists who used to possess the power as appointed members of Politburo, into the free-wheeling capitalists devoted body and soul to the market economy, and who exercise a similar power as the elected member of the new Russian parliament, should suffice. 1042. It is absolutely essential for one's peace of mind to do or strongly believe in being capable of doing at least one thing well. For then we can go on with our lives forgiving all the rest the sins of being better than we are at almost anything else. 1043. All successful, long-lasting relations, be it between the two individuals, an individual and a group, or between the two groups, are but the infinite variation of the one and the same theme, the mutual admiration society. For they all are kept alive by the reciprocal flattery, both tireless and inexhaustible. 1044. The one who is constantly driven by the overpowering, uncontrollable urge to generalize, as I am, has to be much more knowledgeable about numerous particular cases and details than those who never venture beyond them. For he should expect to be forever attacked by the enraged particularist, trying to shatter his generalization by using every possible exception to overthrow the rule, and be well prepared to defend the universality of truth from the singularity of relativism. 1045. Since nowadays only the most willfully ignorant and blatant racist can suggest that the national characteristics are genetically predetermined, and yet even the most orthodox universalist cannot deny the existence of this unique mixture of peculiar habits, manners of speech, culinary and artistic taste, etc., that have come to be known as a national character. For one has to pretend to be deaf and blind to ignore the fact that the average Englishman's social cultural behavior is somewhat different from that of the average Frenchman. The explanation has to be found for such an obvious differences. Now, besides the undeniable influence of history and geography in general on the formation of a national character, another more specific cause comes to mind, the one which, to the best of my knowledge, hasn't been offered yet in this, regrettably, little explored field of social study, namely the importance of the dominant social class in the society to set the tone for everybody else to imitate and to conform to, in a manner not unlike that the strong dominant personality of one individual can mold the group he is part of in his own image. This assertion is based also on the assumption that the class behavior, for all intents and purposes, is universal, regardless of this or that particular country. The similar classes in different countries has a lot in common, and that, for example, the English dairy farmer and his French counterpart will feel more comfortable, language aside, with each other than with, let's say, government bureaucrats in their respective country. And the same rules applies as far as class wars are concerned, to the middle class, industrialists, military, etc. But in each country, for whatever historical reasons, one class becomes politically, economically, socially, and finally culturally predominant and begins to dictate from this position of dominance the norm and rule of conduct to the rest. And if this class stays in power long enough, its specific mode of behavior becomes equated with that of the whole nation. Thus, the origin and the pattern of the so-called British character can be derived from the stereotyped behavior of the English middle class, or to be more precise, the upper portion of it, which began its rise to power in the 18th century, reached its pinnacle in Victorian Britain, and still maintains its relative position of importance in today's England. To the lesser extent, for no other European nation was as isolated due to its island location as England, the other nations took their respective cues from their own predominant classes. Germans from their military aristocracy, Italians from their artists and artisans, Dutch from its traders, etc. For one can easily find the traces of this specific class behavior of the specific class behavior of these dominant subgroups in the national character of their compatriots. And finally, as an afterthought, not a single political demagogue has ever lost by betting on this perhaps elusive and sometimes hard to define, but nevertheless real national character in his quest for power. 1046. There are probably no other people on earth that deserve less the name of a nation in the modern sense of the word than the Jews. Not only do they not share the same territory, state, language, and culture, but even psychologically and spiritually, 2,000 years of dispersion all over the globe have brought about the situation when a German Jew has much more in common with his German compatriots than with his Russian co-religionist. And yet, against seemingly unsurmountable odds, even the Jews have managed to acquire some resemblance of a national character. For there is at least one inclination common to all Jews in the world, no matter where they live or what social positions they occupy. Whether in Russia or Argentina, whether a carpenter or a lawyer, a Jew always displays unmistakable propensity to prophecy. As to the code of the simples, though one is tempted very strongly to trace it to the biblical prophets, perhaps another reason, more practical, is fitting in this case. For giving their history of endless persecution and permanent uncertainty, the Jews more than anybody else had come to rely on the correct reading of the future to survive. To paraphrase a famous American expression, trying to guess whether you are going to be hanged the next morning, and if yes, to find a way to escape before it's too late, concentrates one's mind wonderfully. 1047. There are few things that can pull people as far apart as trying too hard to get closer. 1048. The rapacious, the violent, the power-hungry are never completely satisfied if what they crave for is simply given to them. For unlike the rest of us, their peculiar brand of pleasure, their true gratification, is derived not from the mere possession of the desirable, but from getting it by force, by crushing the resistance of the unyielding and unwilling to give in, from the sheer act of rape in all its various manifestations, shapes, and form. And if one is looking for some symbolic illustration of the above described phenomenon, a man who, upon finding a prostitute he just hired already undressed in a bed, orders her to get up, put the clothes on, and resist him, should be a close one. 1049. Oh, how I envy people who are not constantly driven by the relentless compulsion to say something new, original, or simply something of their own, like I am, but go through life contentedly, parroting everybody else around them, seemingly not a bit distressed or embarrassed by endlessly repeating all those cliches, platitudes, and commonplaces currently in vogue. Yes, how do I sometimes envy them, but only sometimes. 1050. Most of the people, most of the times, in order to get what they want, have to do what they don't.